They called it a gratitude tithe. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the UNS Argo, her form a stark silhouette against the star-dusted velvet of the Kepler 186F viewport. Before them hung the jewel of their 200-year journey, a world of ochre continents and sapphire oceans, the cradle for the 200,000 souls sleeping in the ship's heart. But they were not alone. A vessel of impossible scale, a sliver of polished obsidian, hung in high orbit like a patient predator. It belonged to the Vexathian Ascendancy, the system's self-appointed guardians. They had been waiting. Their price for safety was simple, elegant, and absolute. Her legal officer, Javier Ortega, watched the decoded message scroll across his console, his knuckles white. It's a contract of adhesion, Commander. Non-negotiable. They call it the Covenant of Reciprocal Gratitude. Gratitude for what Rostova's voice was low-tight. For their protection. From rogue elements, cosmic radiation, stellar flares. The general hostility of the universe. Javier looked up, his face grim. They're offering us a cage and calling it a shield. And if we refuse, we're in violation of concordant sanctuary law. The threat was unspoken but clear. A public inquiry before a star court was the only path that did not end in open conflict. The first Vexathian transmission was not a threat, but a welcome. Its tone was like warm honey laced with the unshakable confidence of a power that had not been challenged in millennia. The being on screen, the prelate Kalin, was a column of shimmering liquid light contained within a suit of gunmetal gray. It had no face, only a gentle, resonant voice that filled the Argo's bridge. You have traveled far, children of Sol, it chimed. Rest now. You are safe. We are the wardens of this garden. Humanity did not cross the void to trade one master for another. Rostova kept her expression neutral, a mask of diplomatic calm she had perfected over decades. We thank you for the welcome, prelate. The United Nations ship Argo carries the charter for this world. Our claim is filed and ratified by the concordance. She chose her words with the precision of a surgeon. Indeed, the prelate's voice soothed. A valid claim to a protected world. And we are the protectors. Your charter requires you to integrate with local governance and security protocols. We are those protocols. A data packet bloomed on Javier's console. The Covenant. It was beautiful, its legal architecture flawless. It spoke of harmony, balance, and shared destiny. Its clauses, however, spoke of tribute. 10% of all energy generated. 10% of all raw materials extracted. 10% of all atmospheric processing. And the final line, the one that made Rostova's blood run cold, a tithe of cognitive surplus, a term left deliberately, terrifyingly vague. The law could be a shield or it could be a cage. From her simulation pod, a young girl named Alara dreamed of running through fields of red grass under a sun she had never felt. Her parents watched over her digital avatar, their hands clasped tight. They had sacrificed everything for this single image of a future, a promise whispered across generations. That promise was now being presented with a bill. Rostova turned to the ship's mind, Solon. The AI's avatar, a simple sphere of calm blue light, pulsed beside her command chair. Solon analysis. What are the Vexathian energy expenditures for their protection? Calculating the AI's voice was pure, synthesized logic, based on local sensor readings and galactic energy baselines. The Vexathian vessel's output is remarkably low. They are maintaining a system-wide deflection field, but the energy cost is anomalous. It is a small fraction of what should be required to power such a barrier. There it was, the first crack in the perfect facade. Anomalous how they are either employing a technology thousands of years beyond concordant standards, Solon stated, or they are not generating the power themselves. The numbers suggest they are merely shaping and redirecting ambient energy. Their cost is nearly zero. A shepherd who charges his flock for the grass that grows freely on the hill. Rostova felt a cold, hard knot of anger form in her chest. They were not protectors. They were parasites cloaked in the unimpeachable language of the law. Their gratitude was a currency they measured in chains. She looked at the Vexathian ship, a silent monolith of ancient power. Refusing the tithe was an act of war they could not win. Accepting it was a slow, generational death sentence. Javier Rostova said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Find me a weakness in that contract. Not a loophole, a seam. Something we can pull until the whole thing unravels. I've run 62 different legal simulations, Javier replied, his eyes tired. Every path leads to arbitration overwhelmingly in their favor. Their covenant has been upheld for 6,000 years. Dozens of species have challenged it. None have succeeded. The weight of 200,000 sleeping lives pressed down on her. The Vexathians knew this. They counted on the weight of responsibility to crush any thought of defiance. This was not a negotiation. It was a surrender dressed in finery. The house of their law was built on a foundation of fear. A priority alert chimed softly. Tactical Officer Kenji Tanaka's station flashed red. Commander, high-velocity object inbound. Trajectory is sector adjacent, but a potential threat. Looks like a rogue asteroid. The prelate's voice returned unbidden to their channel. Worry not, children of Saul. Observe. On the main view screen, the Vexathian ship pulsed once, a barely perceptible shimmer of black on black. 100,000 kilometers away, the asteroid, a mountain of rock and ice the size of a small city, simply dissolved. It did not explode. It gently atomized into a glittering cloud of harmless dust. The demonstration was flawless, effortless, and terrifying. Their power was a statement that needed no translation. A moment later, a new data packet arrived. It was an invoice. The energy cost for neutralizing the threat calculated at a staggering premium. It was a debt to be paid from the colony's future energy production. The first payment of the gratitude tithe, levied before a single human foot had touched the planet's surface. Solon Rostova commanded, her voice dangerously calm. Did you get it? Yes, Commander, the AI replied. During the energy pulse, I was able to conduct a full-spectrum resonance scan. The anomaly is confirmed. The Vexathians did not project a weapon. They briefly lowered a specific section of the system's deflection field and allowed the ambient cosmic energy to sublimate the asteroid. Their net energy expenditure was 0.01% of what they have invoiced us for. So the shepherd not only charged for the grass, he charged for the rain that fell from the sky. This was not just extortion, it was a profound, systemic fraud. The Vexathian method was not to rule by force, but to reign by the ledger. But why the lie? The energy they demanded was immense, far more than a fleet could ever need. Rostova's mind raced. They couldn't fight them. They couldn't outrun them. They had to outthink them. The Concordance courts were built on precedent, and the Vexathian precedent was an iron wall. But no wall was perfect. Every structure had a load-bearing point. Find it, and the whole edifice comes down. The Argo teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. We pay what is owed, not what is demanded. That was the core tenet of humanity's interstellar policy, the very soul of their fleet. They were explorers and builders, not subjects. They respected laws, but they would not bow to legal fictions. Javier, she said, a new hardness in her tone. Stop looking for a way to break the contract. Start looking for a way to enforce it, to the letter. Javier looked confused. Commander, enforcing it is what they want. No, Rostova countered. They want us to submit to it. That's not the same thing. They have presented a bill for services rendered. We are a new signatory to their covenant. It is our right, even our obligation, to understand the terms of our gratitude. We will request a full accounting. A flicker of understanding dawned in Javier's eyes. A public audit. It was a risky, audacious gambit. An accounting requires transparency, and transparency was the one thing these creatures of shadow could not afford. They built their empire in the dark spaces between the words of the law. The Vexathians, as if sensing the shift in the Argo's bridge, made their next move. A soft, melodic chime preceded another message from the prelate. UNS Argo. The voice was still warm, but a chill crept into its edges. For your safety and seamless integration, we must insist on a standard quarantine period. We will need to conduct a full biorhythm and cognitive pattern analysis to ensure your species is compatible with the existing harmony of the system. Kenji swore under his breath. It's a legal pretext to stall us. They can keep us in orbit for years under that clause. Worse, Javier added, reading the fine print. During the analysis, they are permitted to broadcast educational and cultural materials directly to the ship's network. It's a re-education program, propaganda. They were being placed in a holding pattern, a gilded cage where they would be slowly conditioned to accept their fate. The Vexathians would not use weapons to break their will. They would use process. They would use procedure. They would drown them in the crushing, patient weight of their bureaucracy. This was the escalation. The gentle hand was now closing into a fist. The choice was being taken from them. They could either consent to the slow erosion of their autonomy or be branded as uncooperative, hostile, and in violation of concordance law. They were being led down a corridor with only one door at the end. A junior cryo-technician monitored her board, her brow furrowed with worry. The Vexathian energy invoice had automatically been logged against the ship's future output. Her console showed a projection. The energy drain would mean a 4% reduction in the cryopod safety margins. It was a small number, but over 200,000 souls, that number was a body count. They've overplayed their hand, Rostova said, a sudden sharp clarity in her mind. They believe we are just another species to be cowed. They assume we will react with fear or anger. They are not prepared for us to react with paperwork. She turned to her command chair, the weight of her decisions settling onto her shoulders. Solon's blue light pulsed a silent beacon of pure logic. The AI had already calculated the odds. A direct challenge was statistical suicide. A legal challenge was a long shot with a 78% probability of failure, resulting in punitive sanctions and the permanent impoundment of the colony. But it was not zero. Humans had always been good at defying the odds. It was how they'd reached the stars in the first place. They did not run from the storm. They learned to navigate it. Solon Rostova said, her voice ringing with authority. Find the most obscure, least used clause in the Concordance Charter regarding treaty clarification for new signatories. The AI was silent for precisely 1.3 seconds. Found. Article 7, Section 4, Paragraph B. The right of procedural clarification. It allows a new party to a long-standing covenant to compel a public inquiry to ensure full and transparent understanding of their obligations. It is considered a diplomatic courtesy, It has not been successfully invoked in over 900 years. They will see it as a desperate tactic, a fly buzzing at a giant, Javier warned. They'll dismiss it. Let them, Rostova replied. Their arrogance is the seam we were looking for. We aren't going to challenge their tithe. We are going to embrace it. We are going to demand to know, in excruciating detail, how we can best fulfill our duty, how we can show our boundless gratitude. Her plan was forming a beautiful, terrible piece of legal maneuvering. She would not accuse them of fraud. She would praise their diligence. She would not question their bill. She would ask for a more detailed itemization so she could properly appreciate their efforts. She would turn their own weapon, the suffocating minutiae of the law, back against them. A court of law is a place where stories are told. He who tells the better story wins. The Vexathians had been telling the same story for thousands of years. It was time for a new one. Kenji, open a ship-wide channel. Priority 1. Full diplomatic protocol, Rostova commanded. The deck lights dimmed slightly, focusing attention on the command chair. Rostova stood her back straight, the future of her species resting on the words she was about to say. The view screen shimmered, and the liquid light form of Prelate Kalin reappeared, its presence filling the screen with an aura of immense ancient power. Prelate Kalin Rostova began, her voice a perfect blend of respect and firm resolve. We have reviewed the covenant of reciprocal gratitude and the invoice for your recent protective services. The people of the UNS Argo are humbled by your vigilance. A soft, pleased chime was her only reply. Our culture, however, places a profound emphasis on the concept of earned thanks. Rostova continued her words, weaving the beginning of her trap. For us, gratitude is not a passive tax, but an active participatory process. To simply pay the tithe would be insufficient. It would be a disservice to the magnitude of your protection. The prelate's form seemed to still a subtle shift in its shimmering energy. This was not the response it had expected. To that end, Rostova pressed on, and to ensure our two cultures begin this journey in a spirit of perfect transparency and mutual understanding, I formally invoke Article 7, Section 4, Paragraph B of the Concordance Charter. We request a public inquiry, a forum for procedural clarification. We wish to discuss the methodology of your services so that we may understand the true depth of our debt and express our gratitude in a manner befitting its scale. She was not demanding. She was requesting. She was not accusing. She was asking for help. It was a move of such exquisite legal jujitsu that Javier could only stare in admiration. To refuse a junior species' humble request to better understand their obligations would be an act of profound arrogance. It would be a mark against them on the public concordance ledger, a small thing, but the Vexathians' record was flawless. They would not suffer a blemish, no matter how minor. A teacher in the Argo's simulation deck guided a group of children through a lesson on ethics. What is the difference between a tax and a tribute, she asked their small digital avatars. A young boy raised his hand. A tax is what you pay to build something together. A tribute is what you pay so you don't get broken. The silence from the Vexathian ship stretched for a full minute. The prelate was conferring with its superiors, running calculations of its own. They would see the trap, of course, but they would also see their own perfect legal standing. They would believe their position was unassailable. They would believe they could easily humiliate the upstart humans in an open forum and cement their authority for 1,000 more years. Their pride would be their downfall. The prelate's voice returned, the warmth gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline precision. Your request is unusual, Commander Rostova, but your desire to understand is commendable. The Vexathian ascendancy applauds transparency. We accept. Javier let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The first gate was open. A concordance arbiter will be summoned to oversee the proceedings, the prelate continued. A neutral venue will be established. Be prepared to present your questions, Commander. We will be prepared to answer them. The transmission ended. The gambit had worked. They had their forum. A corridor of law where their enemy would be compelled to speak. And if they spoke, they would have to lie. And if they lied in a place where truth was algorithmically verifiable, the entire foundation of their 6,000-year empire would begin to crumble. Victory would not be won with weapons. It would be won with receipts. Rostova stood firm, but her heart hammered against her ribs. The next step was the most dangerous. They had to prepare for a battle of wits against a species that had been practicing this form of warfare since before humanity had discovered fire. She looked at her crew, at the faces of Javier and Kenji, etched with a mixture of terror and hope. Solon, she said, her voice steady. Begin instantiating the inquiry protocols. Slave all non-essential processing power to legal analysis and precedent discovery. We need every argument, every transcript, every decision related to the Vexathian Covenant for the last 6 millennia. Already underway, Commander, the AI confirmed. I have also taken the liberty of filing the formal summons with the Mandamus Concourse. An arbiter is en route. The digital venue is being constructed as we speak. On the main view screen, the empty space between the Argo and the Vexathian vessel began to shimmer. Lines of pure white light etched themselves into the void, weaving a complex, three-dimensional lattice. It was the framework of the corridor of law, a neutral, consecrated space created by concordant subroutines. It was a courtroom made of hard light and harder logic. A place where empires could be brought to their knees, not by fleets, but by a single well-placed question. The arena was set. The audience was watching. And humanity was about to put the law itself on trial. The corridor of law was a cathedral of impossibly straight lines. It possessed no mass, only definition. The concordance arbiter, a being designated Unit 734, manifested at its heart. It was a perfect geometric solid, a floating dodecahedron of spun silver that pulsed with a soft internal light. Its voice was the sound of grinding glaciers and chiming bells, a harmony of immense age and impartial logic. This inquiry is convened, it declared, its voice resonating in the void. The plaintiff UNS Argo petitions for clarification. The defendant, the Vexathian Ascendancy, is compelled to provide it. The record is now open. Commander Rostova, you may begin. In the cryobay, a father gently touched the frosted glass of his daughter's pod. He was an engineer, a man of numbers and stress tolerances. He watched the light court hanging in the black, a silent cosmic lawsuit playing out above their new home. He felt a profound sense of helplessness, a passenger in a drama whose outcome would define his child's entire existence. All their dreams were held in escrow, pending a verdict they could not influence. Rostova stood at a hard-light lectern opposite the shimmering column of Prelate Kalin. Javier was at her side, his console alive with data streams. Solon was a silent partner, its consciousness integrated with the inquiry's legal framework. Arbiter Prelate, Rostova began, her voice calm and measured. We are here not to contest our debt, but to celebrate it. Our gratitude is so profound that we feel it is our sacred duty to understand the mechanics of the miracle you perform. A miracle deserves more than blind payment. It deserves witness. The truth, when weaponized, is the sharpest blade in any arsenal. The prelate's form wavered, a subtle sign of something. Surprise, annoyance. Your sentiment is appreciated, Commander, Kalin's voice resonated. Ask your questions. We have nothing to hide. Thank you, Prelate. Rostova said, a picture of earnest sincerity. Our first question concerns the neutralization of the rogue asteroid. It was a masterful display. Our logs show an invoice for 1.2 petajoules of energy expenditure. Could you describe for the public record the projection system used? Understanding its elegance will only deepen our appreciation for your protection. This was the first stone cast, a simple technical question. But it was a stone aimed at the keystone of their entire legal edifice. Kalen had two choices: describe a fictional weapon system and commit perjury in a court of verifiable logic, or reveal the truth. The prelate chose a third option: obfuscation. Our methods are complex, Commander. They involve the precise manipulation of null-point energy fields and the shaping of ambient gravitational potentials. To explain it in terms your species could grasp would be like describing quantum mechanics to a microbe. It is sufficient to say that energy was expended on your behalf. The ledger reflects this. Arrogance is the armor of a fool. Javier's fingers flew across his console. He's citing the technological disparity clause, he whispered to Rostova. It allows a superior's power to withhold technical details if they are deemed beyond the comprehension of the junior party. It's a legal dead end. For now, Rostova whispered back. She turned again to the prelate. Of course. We would not presume to understand the intricacies of your science. We are, as you say, children in this galaxy. But even a child can understand a receipt. Solon, please display the resonance scan from the event. Beside her, a new hard-light window bloomed. It showed a topographical map of the system's energy field. At the moment of the asteroid's destruction, it clearly depicted not a projection of energy from the Vexathian ship, but a brief surgical lowering of the ambient field around the asteroid. The asteroid had not been shot. It had been exposed to the raw, untamed energy of the cosmos for a fraction of a second. Prelate, Rostova asked, her voice still radiating polite curiosity. Our primitive sensors must be malfunctioning. They seem to indicate a temporary retraction of the system's protective shield, not an outward projection. Could you help us understand this discrepancy? We simply want to ensure our own systems are properly calibrated to appreciate your future efforts. She had not accused them of lying. She had accused her own ship of being inadequate. It was a masterful stroke of feigned humility. To dispute it, Kalen would have to call them liars, directly an act of aggression. To agree, he would have to admit their sensors were correct. The prelate was caught. Silence descended upon the corridor of law. The Arbiter Unit 734 rotated slowly, its silver facets reflecting the stark drama. The public record was capturing every moment of this hesitation. For a power that had built its reputation on flawless, effortless authority, this pause was a crack in the mirror. A system built on faith cannot withstand a single honest question. Your sensors are not malfunctioning, the prelate finally said, its voice losing its warmth, replaced by a cold, sharp edge. They are merely unsophisticated. You observed a secondary effect of the energy resonance. The core process remains as described. The invoice stands. Do you have a more substantive question, Commander? Or is this inquiry merely a delay tactic? The escalation had begun. The velvet glove was coming off. The prelate had doubled down on the lie, and in doing so had given Rostova exactly what she needed: a provable falsehood entered into a concordance court record. Our apologies, prelate, Rostova replied, bowing her head slightly. Our intention is only to clarify. We will move on. She had the hook. Now she had to set it. Now, Solon, what is the total assessed value of the gratitude tithe from this system, projected over the standard 75-year integration period? Calculated at current resource estimates and energy production curves, the AI's voice chimed into the court. The total tithe amounts to approximately 4.8 zettajoules of energy and 1.2 billion metric tons of refined materials. The numbers were staggering, almost nonsensical. Rostova let them hang in the silent courtroom. "An immense price worthy of an immense service," she said, turning back to the prelate. "Our final area of clarification, then, is one of purpose. So that my people may fully grasp the scope of your protection, can you detail for the record the nature of the threats this tithe allows you to defend against? What cosmic horrors are you holding at bay?" This was the second, more dangerous question. It shifted the focus from the how to the why. The Vexathians claimed to be protectors, wardens of a dangerous garden. But if their protection cost almost nothing, then why was the price of their gratitude so impossibly high? Where did all that energy go? A new vignette played out on the Argo's education network. A simulation showed a class of cadets the history of the Concordance. "The Vexathian ascendancy has never fought a war, my enfant," the instructor noted. "Their record is one of de-escalation and sanctuary. They are universally regarded as pillars of stability." A young woman raised her hand. "But instructor, how do you project stability without projecting power?" The instructor smiled grimly. "That, cadet, is a question that has puzzled xenopologists for centuries." The prelate's form seemed to contract, its light dimming. "The threats are myriad and ever-present. Rogue singularities, subspace instabilities, aggressor species from beyond the concordant sphere. Our work is constant, Commander. The tithe is not a payment for a single action, but a contribution to a perpetual state of security that benefits all." The justification was a wall of polished, unverifiable claims. Any other species would be forced to accept it. But humanity had sullen. "Commander," the AI's voice spoke softly into Rostova's private comm. "I have completed the deep network analysis. I have cross-referenced 6 millennia of Vexathian Covenant records with Concordance energy grid logs from 17 adjacent sectors. I have found the purpose." "Prelate, we thank you for your answer," Rostova said, her heart pounding. The moment of truth was here. "We understand that security is a broad concept, but the Concordance ledger is a tool of specifics. We therefore file a motion under the right of beneficiary accountability for a full public audit of the Vexathian Ascendancy's energy expenditures for this sector. We simply wish to see the fruits of our gratitude to witness the great shield we are helping to maintain." It was an unprecedented move. No one audited the Vexathians. It was like asking a god to show its work. The prelate's form flared a brief, angry nova of light. "This is an insult, an outrageous breach of protocol. The Ascendancy's methods are not subject to the petty audits of a junior race. We have protected this quadrant for longer than your species has had language. We will not be questioned by you. The law questions all." The arbiter's voice boomed, cutting through the prelate's fury. "The right of beneficiary accountability is clear. A tithe-paying entity may request an accounting of services. The request is valid. Prelate Kalin, you will comply. Provide the ledgers. The ledger is the final arbiter of truth." The Vexathian was trapped. To refuse the direct order of a Concordance arbiter was to be held in contempt, a catastrophic blow to their reputation. To comply was to reveal the truth. They had walked into a corridor of law from which there was no escape. They believed their authority was the law. They were about to learn that the law had an authority of its own. A stream of data flowed from the Vexathian ship into the court's record. It was a masterpiece of creative accounting, trillions of data points detailing energy expenditures on phantom patrols, non-existent threats, and preventative measures that were impossible to disprove. It was designed to be overwhelming, a data storm that would bury any inquiry in noise. But Solon was not looking at the noise. The AI was looking for the signal. It ignored the fictional expenditures and focused on one thing, the destination address for the tithed energy itself. And there it was. A single, heavily encrypted routing vector, the same vector used by every Vexathian protected system for 6,000 years. "Commander!" Solon's voice was calm, but Rostova could feel the undercurrent of immense discovery. The energy is not being used for protection. It is being funneled to a single coordinate in the Oort cloud of the Vexath prime system. "What is it?" Rostova whispered. "It is a stellar engine," the AI replied. "A megastructure wrapped around a brown dwarf. They are using the combined energy tithes from over 400 species to artificially accelerate the star's fusion process. They are attempting to ignite it to create a new sun." The scale of it was breathtaking. The deception was magnificent. They weren't protecting anyone. They were building something. The gratitude tithe was not a fee for service. It was the fuel for the grandest and most secret construction project in galactic history. And they had made 400 client species pay for it all, under the unimpeachable banner of concordance law. A grand truth can be hidden behind a mountain of small lies. Rostova felt a chill run down her spine. This changed everything. This was not mere fraud. This was a conspiracy on a galactic scale. She looked at Javier, whose face was pale with shock. "What do we do?" he mouthed. "The original plan was to expose the billing fraud. But this was bigger. This was about the fundamental nature of the Vexathian ascendancy. To expose this would be to shatter a pillar of galactic stability. It could lead to chaos, to war, as hundreds of species realized they had been deceived for millennia." The conflict triangle ground within her. Her human morality demanded the truth be revealed. Solon's calculus would be weighing the potential for system-wide destabilization. The Vexathian method now revealed was more audacious than she could have ever imagined. This was the second escalation. The stakes were no longer just about their colony. They were about the balance of power in the entire quadrant. "Arbiter," Rostova said, her voice ringing with newfound purpose. "We have reviewed the ledger provided, and we find it wanting. The numbers are poetry, but we require prose. The defendant claims the tithe is for protection, but the final destination of the tithed energy is not a shield array or a patrol fleet. It is a single undisclosed megastructure." She let the accusation hang in the air. The prelate's form pulsed violently. "You have no proof." "We do," Rostova stated simply. "The Concordance public energy grid is a transparent system. Your routing protocols, while encrypted, leave a signature. Solon has traced that signature. The great shield you speak of is not a shield at all. It is a furnace. You are building a sun." The corridor of law fell utterly silent. The arbiter's silvery form ceased its rotation. For the first time, a flicker of something akin to surprise emanated from the ancient machine. The Vexathians had hidden their greatest secret in the most obvious place of all the public record, confident that no one would ever have the audacity to look. No secret is safe when the auditors arrive. "The charge is perjury," the arbiter stated, its voice devoid of emotion, but heavy with consequence. "The charge is systemic multimillennial fraud. Prelate Kalin, your ascendancy's standing in this concordance is now in jeopardy. The inquiry for clarification is now a trial." The Vexathian ship, the obsidian sliver that had hung so patiently in orbit, began to emit a low-frequency energy spike. It was a threat, a non-verbal, legally deniable display of power. Their legal maneuvering had failed. Now came the implicit promise of force. Kenji Tanaka's voice crackled in Rostova's ear. "Commander, their weapon ports are cycling. They're charging their primary systems. They're going to break quarantine." "Hold your ground, Kenji." Rostova ordered, her eyes locked on the prelate. "They won't fire." Firing on a vessel during a concordance inquiry is an act of open rebellion. They've built their empire on the law. They won't be the ones to tear it down with a cannon. She was betting everything on their psychological profile. They were not warriors. They were lawyers. They would not risk everything in a moment of anger. Their entire identity was tied to their perceived legitimacy. And she was right. The energy spike subsided. The prelate Kalen knew it had lost, but it would not surrender gracefully. "You have won this little game, human," the voice hissed, shedding all pretense of civility. "But you have made an enemy you cannot comprehend. The concordance may shield you today. It will not be there to protect you in the dark." The threat was clear. The law had its limits. "The dark does not frighten us, prelate," Rostova said, her voice ringing with defiance. "We were born in it, but we prefer to live in the light. And the light is what we are going to bring to this whole sorry affair." This was the final escalation. It was no longer about defending their colony. It was about liberating a quadrant. A maintenance crew in the Argo's engineering bay paused their work, watching the live feed of the trial on a bulkhead monitor. They saw the Vexathian threat and their commander's response. A quiet, grim determination settled over them. They were a colony ship, not a warship, but they were also the children of a species that had stared down extinction more than once. They knew how to be stubborn. They knew how to endure. "Arbiter," Rostova announced, playing her final card. "We do not seek punishment. We seek justice. We seek restitution. Not just for ourselves, but for every species bound by the covenant of reciprocal gratitude." She turned to Javier and Solon. "It's time. Execute the mirror ledger." Javier nodded, his face grim but resolute. He typed a final command sequence into his console. Solon acted instantly, interfacing directly with the Concordance's central accounting network. It was a legal maneuver of breathtaking audacity, a piece of code law so elegant and so dangerous, it had only ever been theoretical. The AI took the original Vexathian invoice for 1.2 petajoules, and it paid it. A stream of energy precisely metered was transferred from the Argo's future production commitment to the Vexathian account. But it was paid with a rider, a self-executing codicil that was now and forever a part of concordance law, the mirror clause. A ledger must reflect what is given and what is received. The clause was simple. It stated that for any payment for services rendered, the concordance network must algorithmically verify that the service's energy cost matched the invoice's claim within a 0.1% margin of error. If it did not, the overpayment was to be immediately and publicly returned to the payer. The network processed the payment in microseconds. It cross-referenced the 1.2 petajoule invoice with Solon's now verified resonance scan, which showed the actual Vexathian energy expenditure was a tiny fraction of that. The discrepancy was 99.99%. Across the quadrant on the public ledgers of 400 worlds, a notification bloomed. The concordance network, following its own immutable logic, attempted to refund the Vexathian ascendancy for 60 centuries of fraudulent overbilling. Trillions upon trillions of zettajoules of energy credit, a value so large it threatened to destabilize the galactic economy, was instantly and publicly marked for return. The Vexathians could not accept the refund. To do so would be a legal admission of guilt on a scale unseen in the history of the concordance. They refused the transaction, but the ledger was implacable. The law was the law. The rejected refund did not vanish. Instead, it was placed in a public escrow account, a monumental shimmering monument of guilt visible on every single terminal in the concordance. Their ill-gotten gains were now a poison pill, a debt they owed back to everyone they had ever cheated. Their greatest asset had become their greatest liability. The mirror had been held up, and their true face was now visible for all to see. The Arbiter Unit 734 spoke its voice a final crushing judgment. The covenant of reciprocal gratitude is hereby declared null and void, its foundation proven to be fraudulent. All associated tithes are suspended. The Vexathian ascendancy is censured, its voting rights in the concordance suspended, pending a full investigation. This inquiry is closed. The corridor of law dissolved, its lines of light winking out of existence. The Vexathian ship, once a symbol of immense power, now looked like what it was, a hollow shell. Without a word, it turned and slid into the black, its long reign of legal terror finally over. But victory was not without its price. Rostova looked at her crew. They were exhausted, drained by the immense strain of the last few days. The legal battle had consumed vast amounts of the ship's computational resources, delaying their landing schedule by months. More than that, the Vexathian parting threat lingered in the air. They had won this battle, but they had started a new colder war. They had traded a visible cage for an invisible enemy that would now hunt them from the shadows of the law and the dark spaces between worlds. On the main view screen, the Concordance public ledger entry for case number 774 Alpha UNS Argo v. Vexathian Ascendancy blinked from pending to confirmed. The system-wide precedent was locked. A new line of law appeared, etched into the code: for all time privileges of protection are rescinded where the accounting of gratitude is demonstrably false. The mirror arrays on the Argo, the ones Solon had repurposed to route the single devastating energy payment, slowly dimmed their silvery surfaces, cooling in the void. Rostova watched the ochre continents of their new home spin below, no longer a prize to be paid for, but a world to be earned. She had held the line. She had not sacrificed her principles for safety, nor her anger for pragmatism. They had been tested not with weapons, but with words, and they had proven that the human spirit was not something that could be bound by a contract of adhesion. Justice was not a gift from the powerful. It was a reckoning calculated on a ledger for all to see. The law is a mirror, and it reflects all truths eventually.